It's not often you get bombed 4-0 at home, and then the very next game you go and bomb your opponent 4-0. And so Aston Villa is off to the quarterfinals of the Europa Conference League, where they will meet, and the path to Athens, the Pathans, if you will, is all laid out right there in front of us. Now, the win didn't come without a cost, and at the time of recording this, we're all waiting with bated breath to see the kind of condition that Ollie Watkins is in, heading into, of course, big game with West Ham on Sunday, but also for his England call-up. But for now, shall we just savor Aston Villa 4, Ajax 0. Just before we get into Ajax, I want to follow up on a couple of things with the Spurs game because there were so many comments, but I reviewed the 0-1 goal again, and is it possible that Spurs actually set a trap on Villa here? Because teams do that, obviously. They try to invite the press, and then they're prepared to quickly play around it, and that kind of looks to be the case. Only the people involved will know for sure. And by the way, Big Ange, clearly an admirer of Marcelo Bielsa. Well, all managers are. If you ask them who their hero is, they'll usually say Marcelo Bielsa, because he presses hard up front and then goes man-to-man out of possession, which is fun to watch. But the only problem with that system is you need a really big, talented, and most of all, healthy squad to pull it off. Lots of conjecture still on the John McGinn red card, many saying that it was the reaction of the Spurs bench that tipped the referee's hand in some ways, keeping in mind that if Destiny Udogie had done the exact same thing to McGinn in front of the Villa bench, they would have reacted the exact same way, which means that players aren't stupid. They know what they're doing and which part of the field might inflame their opponents, not to mention the fourth official referee and the assistant referee. So, yes, maybe had that incident occurred in the corner or on the opposite side of the field, perhaps different result. But there's part of me that thinks that McGinn knew exactly what he was doing and, more importantly, where he was doing it. A lot was made about the tactics after the Tottenham loss, and people saying Emery got his tactics wrong. Really? Were they in the room when the tactics were being discussed? Because neither you nor I know for sure. The only people that know what the plan is are the ones in that dressing room. And yes, I think there were at times 5 players playing at the back, and I suspect that was because they didn't want to get done in on the back post at the blind side. Was there an overload in midfield? Don't know, because Pau Torres would step into midfield, so would Luka Dean, and so would Matt Cash. It was interesting, however, after the game, Emery was asked about the 5 at the back and the tactics, and he did not engage whatsoever. He skipped right past the question. Hello from the parlor, where I'm super pumped because the next time Villa play at home, I'll be amongst it. This is the Holy Trinity Show. It's all about the 3 key issues or moments that defined the game, and there were many moments of significance. Villa Park looks as lovely at night, maybe even lovelier somehow than even during the daytime. And would you look at this? The Holy Trinity shows 2 senior correspondents together side by each. Samir and Alex, the guy on the left known for his rockin' kits, and the guy on the right known for, well, rocking. I mean, these 2 guys are first-team regulars capturing some of the sights and sounds from different angles. And this was only our second ever meeting against Ajax at home. We won the only previous meeting in 2008 with Gareth Barry providing the heroics. They made good noise, the traveling support, and I sure hope that's flare smoke. Statistically, though, you'd think it was a closer game, which is why numbers can be misleading. We edged the XG and shot attempts versus those on target. Great ratio there, 13 attempts, 8 on target, but just 2 big chances created, and our passing accuracy was relatively close. We actually had less possession, even though Ajax had 10 men for 24 minutes. Douglas Luiz had a sneaky good game. He created 4 chances in this match. One of them was a big chance. He earned assists on the Watkins and Bailey goals, and the site I use had him as the man of the match based on the numbers. first little issue, and the way I read this, was that John McGinn won the coin toss and elected to send his team Holt end bound in that first half. And what's curious is 8 goals have been scored at Villa Park over the last 2 games, 7 of them into the North Stand goal, and all of them but one scored in the second half. So was McGinn just trying to change the vibe around a little bit, saying, do you know what? We're going to get you to attack a goal that we're kind of vulnerable in of late, and we're going to shut you down. And in the second half, if you want to get anything out of this game, you're going to have to attack our wall of supporters, not the goal on the side where your supporters are standing. Just a thought. Then I came across this. This is the Premier League's goals for and against in the 6 15-minute phases of the game. And look at Aston Villa in minutes 15 to 30, plus 14. That is staggering. And lo and behold, Ollie Watkins' goal comes during that phase, minute 25. Our Achilles heel, though, is just after halftime, those 15 minutes where we are -8. I mean, that is incredible to me. And I wonder if the technical staff either realizes it or analyzes it or is going to address it, because those seem like really big swings to me. And if we can button that up, those 15 minutes after halftime, and be either even or on the plus side, well, that could go a long way in helping us secure Champions League football next season. Obviously, it's always going to be a big issue when we're talking about the middle game in a 3-game week, but this was a very strong lineup in the absence of Ezri Konsa and Jacob Ramsey. We've seen this back line before. Okay, you could argue that Yuri Tielemans is probably a more valuable asset in this team than Morgan Rogers, but does he generally play on the left? And it's good to have the kid's size. Musa Diaby playing in behind the striker. We'll talk about that more later, but under the circumstances, this is a really strong lineup. Just quickly looking ahead, because after Sunday it's an international break. No McGinn for West Ham, but Konsa will be back. Both Dean and Longley will be fresh, even if Carlos is not available. And then the big questions, of course, surround the fitness of Ollie Watkins and who's going to play alongside Douglas Luiz, who has just wrapped up 353 straight minutes between Luton, Ajax, Spurs. Ajax finally came off in the 83rd minute, and he has international duty after Sunday, and thankfully it's in Europe. The first game in London, the second one in Madrid, so no South American travel for Dougie. Big issue, important issue. Musa was magic. Did selection to the French men's national team, Le Bleu, give him some kind of a shot in the arm, a confidence boost, some reassurance that he's not a forgotten man? Because apart from his goal, he had 3 shots on target. He created 2 chances, won both of his dribbles successfully, 2 out of 2, and he won 4 of 6 ground duels. But most importantly of all was his chemistry with Leon Bailey. Even though Diaby's starting position was behind Watkins, which I think has been the plan for him since he arrived at Villa, that didn't stop him from drifting to the left or drifting to the right and connecting with his former Leverkusen teammate Bailey, and they looked so in sync a couple of times. And then there was the pace. He had pop again in his acceleration, and he wasn't afraid of getting into a tackle. In fact, he had 2 tackle attempts, and he won both of them. This is a really good sign. That game, hopefully, is a catalyst for more. And what if Musa Diaby ends the season the way he started it? Big moment. Manswerk marched. And just like when John McGinn was sent off against Tottenham after we were down 2-0, a lot of eerie similarities between those games, it was effectively over. Now, I thought this player could have been sent off in the first leg because he received a card and then made kind of a naughty challenge and got away with it. But we all knew when he was sent off with the scoreline where it was, Aston Villa had 1 boot in the quarterfinals. Deeply satisfying and enjoyable moment. Leon Bailey rolling home his 4th goal in this European campaign, just as the traveling Ajax supporters were winding down their traditional post-halftime serenade to Bob, 3 Little Birds. Sadly for them, every little thing did not go all right as Bailey jinked and jived and Jamaican jerked his way through the team. And this was a mashup, if you ask me. While these three beauties looked on with delight, Samir found them in the crowd. 3 new subscribers to the Holy Trinity show. Did you know that Birmingham had one of the world's largest Jamaican populations? Surely when I go over, there's got to be a proper patty place somewhere. 24/7 Services has been so screaming busy that Paul Handsaker has had to actually devote his trusty number 2 man, Brad Gregory, to all of the Holy Trinity show inquiries, of which there have been many, and for which I am so thankful and grateful to you. And Paul will say it himself, this isn't some kind of downgrade from me going out and doing all that work, because Brad's kind of like Leon Bailey. He keeps getting better and better, and Paul keeps having to extend his contract, which is good for the big lad, who's also a trusty member of the 24/7 Football Club, and of course, Villa through and through, so you don't have to worry about that part, having him come over, and he'll probably be the one who does your fair quote. Big moment number 3, credit Cash. Matty Cash had a bit of a rough outing against Spurs. Now, was that partially because there was some ambiguity about his role? Was he playing right midfield? Was he dropping back to be part of a 5? Of course, neither he nor Ezri Konsa stopped James Maddison, who ran between them to score the 1-0 goal. And Cash has been taking it on the chin a lot this season. But he popped up on the goal line and made a very important contribution in the dying moments of that first half. And of course, football never knows about the what ifs, should haves, could haves, what might have beens, because you just don't know. But the game could have changed significantly if Ajax had scored in the dying embers of the first half, and we would have had a lot to think about during the interval. Emi Martinez had such a stress-free night, which is perfect. I mean, I saw him lighting a cigar and pouring a cognac in minute 37. And our backline, although pressed at times by Ajax, navigated it and then started to look like the backline that we've come to know and love throughout parts of this season. But Ajax did finally get in and amongst it late in that first half, and my goodness, Matthew Cash saw the opportunity, read it, snuffed it, and that allowed us to not have to spend the next 15 minutes fretting over the scoreline and what might happen, because it really would have flattered the visitors at 1-1. Big issue number 2, situation seized. I already talked about Musa Diaby, how he absolutely made the most of his minutes, which he's been a little bit starved of lately, at least starts. And then in the 33rd minute, we have the situation where our key frontman had to step aside, and John Duran is introduced, having not played since the Everton away game on January 14th, and the Colombian seized it. Isn't it interesting this year how one player has stepped off the stage just as another was recovering or returning to the group? And speaking of returning to the group, how good a sight is this? I mean, is there any chance here? It's mid-March. Any chance? Back to Duran. There is no question this cat has talent and potential. Otherwise, he wouldn't be on so many big clubs' radar of late. He is fast. His legs are springy. He's explosive. He's big. His shot can hurt people, or the woodwork, as it turns out. But I'm tired of people making excuses for him, saying things like, well, he's still so young and he's having a tough time adapting to the culture in England or life in the Premier League. I'm sorry, this is a no excuse culture type team now. And there have been many foreign players who have struggled to adapt to life in England or the Premier League. And some of them have been younger than John Duran, and they've adapted without the fuss or the drama. And I wonder if Duran is one of those kinds of players who needs to be the man up front. Kind of like how Watkins was when Danny Ings was in the squad, and Unai Emery recognized that. And look what's happened since. Regardless, Duran did not waste the opportunity. Before scoring, he nearly earned a penalty or almost scored from there. He had a couple of shots, and then he does score. And the crossbar is still shuddering as I speak. And okay, maybe Ollie Watkins can't play on Sunday, but Duran gives off this vibe of a player who's so confident, like, give me the ball, I'm ready, I want to play. And what would you rather in your team? That kind of guy, or the guy that's like, don't look at me, boss? That same issue over opportunity was experienced as well by Morgan Rogers. The only reason why he came off was because he was on a yellow and he kind of committed a bit of a dodgy tackle not long after being booked. But he got more minutes under his belt, as did Big Tim. And even though they were limited minutes, it will give those players belief and acceptance. And we desperately need right now for everybody in our squad to feel like they belong and that they can contribute. And the number one big moment that defined Villa 4, Ajax 0, Watkins, goal, and gone. The only thing that took a shine off of this performance was obviously seeing Ollie Watkins hobbling off with a heavily tensor bandaged knee, which was a lot better than it initially looked when he first banged it and was lying on the ground and covering his head with his shirt. I mean, were you thinking the worst? I know what I was thinking. We're f***ed. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I've been peppering my physio while she's working on this dodgy shoulder of mine over things like ACL tears and ruptures for obvious reasons this season. And generally, when you use a tensor or a compression bandage, it's for two reasons. One, to provide stability or support in a weakened area, or two, to stop swelling. If there was even a whiff of ligament damage to Ollie Watkins, there is no way he would have stayed on the park, and they would have tested carefully for that issue. So when I see it again, I'm thinking, maybe a bruise or a strain, which causes swelling, which then can get worse as a game goes on, become more uncomfortable, forcing Ollie Watkins to thankfully walk off on his own accord, which is a really good sign. And you know what? Watkins needed a rest any way he could get it. And keeping in mind that this happened before the player I'm now nicknaming Meal Ticket scored what was the decisive and game-winning goal. And he does so, just like at Luton, by stationing himself at the near post. And he stays there while everybody else is making a really distracting kind of run. What a ball by Dougie. And he just guides the ball ever so gently into the far top corner. I mean, Ollie Watkins scores them every which way. And then 7 minutes later, he says, that's it. I'm off. I'm out. Going to take care of this. See you next time. And why we got to keep our fingers and toes crossed, not just because of the West Ham game coming up, but because he's just been called up for England with Ezri Konsa. And I think we all really, for him, his career, for everything, his value, want him to be part of the England setup this summer. And just with that trip to the London Stadium on Sunday, by the way, it's interesting, David Moyes, the last manager to win the Europa Conference League, and Mohamed Kudus, who played for Ajax. Football is such a small world. But West Ham on Thursday were kind of doing a Villa and comfortably cruising into the quarterfinals of the Europa League with a convincing 5-0 win over Freiburg and with a very strong lineup. So when we meet on Sunday, we're kind of going to be in similar shape in terms of game time and fatigue and all those things. Now, West Ham will probably feel like they could still reel in a Europa League or a Europa Conference League place for this coming season if they don't go on and win the whole darn shebang this year. And I'm also quite certain that they will clearly remember what happened to them at Villa Park when they were quite comfortably dispatched by 4-1. And so the European adventure continues, and that's all that matters from Thursday night. And Villa supporters, they get to look forward to another fun away trip and, of course, home game against Lille, and hopefully more. And isn't it interesting that both Greek sides, with the final being in Athens, overturned a rather healthy first leg deficit to win their ties? That is going to be a challenging 4 games for sure. First leg on April 11th, second on April 18th for Villa. The first leg comes between Brentford and Arsenal. The second one between Arsenal and Bournemouth at home. Until Sunday and the trip to West Ham, be well, and as always, up the mighty Villa!